Hello YouTube, this is Christian coming to you with another knife review. This time on the table it's the good old Civivi Elementum. Now this has been a while coming. This particular knife has been around for ages. It's one of Civivi's all-time bestsellers, and I would dare say perhaps one of the most sold knives worldwide. It is an absolute design icon from my point of view. It is just about right for an EDC carry knife. It is small, it is compact, it is really slicey with a fine hollow point blade. In its standard configuration you get it in a D2 blade, which is not quite stainless, but also it doesn't rust easily, so there's enough chromium in that particular steel to withstand at least sweet water use. But you want to look after it a little bit. You want to keep your blade clean and periodically oil it. However, this knife is relatively thin in terms of the knife blade geometry. So it is just a 3mm blade, and it has a really deep hollow grind, which makes it really nice and thin behind the edge, and really great at universal cutting tasks. So this is a knife of choice for me when I don't want to carry too much of a knife, but I want a good all-rounder. So you have good piercing geometry. You also have a geometry that is with enough belly to do push cuts and rolling cuts, and overall for cardboard tasks and slicing, it is just an excellent all-rounder. It wouldn't be my first choice if I went down to the beach, or if I knew I had more substantial cutting tasks to do, which in part is just it's a bit light in that particular respect. Blade thickness and geometry is not, it wouldn't be my first choice for harder cutting tasks. At the same time, it is a little bit on the smallish side in terms of grip length and blade length. So for these kind of scenarios I usually prefer a bigger knife, and I would take one of my giant mouse knives, or perhaps this zero tolerance, or my Chavez knife when it goes into the more grunty stuff. But when I go out and I know I don't have anything in particular coming that requires me to cut anything, and I just want a lightweight universal blade, the Civivi Elementum usually is a very good choice. Now, they make that knife these days in all kinds of different variations. You get a long one, you get a Tento style blade, you get it as a button lock, you get it from Civivi, and you get a premium version from We. I believe they also now make SV35VN special edition, or have made one. You get all kinds of scales. You get Damascus, you get all kinds of colorful schemes on the scales of the knife, and the aftermarket for scales is also relatively big. So if you want to customize your Elementum, there's plenty of choices. So this, however, is just a very basic and inexpensive liner lock with the most basic brown G10 micarta version rather, and it's not, the scales aren't pretty, but this particular knife most of the time it really is in one of my everyday carry pouches, and serves me as a backup knife most of the time. And for that it's great. It's light, and still has all the features that I want to see in a knife that I enjoy using. The action is great for the kind of money you're spending. and at the moment I think you will be able to get that knife at around $30 to $40 easily. For that kind of money, there's very little you can say. I mean, it's a light blade, so it's never going to be drop shut. Or perhaps you can tune it to that level. I could never be bothered. I'm fine with it as it is. It is snappy as far as deployment is concerned, and I personally don't mind if I have to give it a little push, especially in such a small and inexpensive package. Now you can see the scales here kind of shadow boxed around the liners, which yeah, these days I think you could expect that they do inset liners perhaps on some versions, but the shadow box is a style within itself, and I sort of like it. It gives a very classy look to it, and it is, as far as design is concerned, perhaps one of the more iconic designs, just because they get everything right in terms of proportion. The actual handle is very comfortable, and the way they designed the flipper tab, it's really not that big. It is never an issue in the pocket. As far as jimping is concerned, and the angle of your finger engagement there, it's about perfect for a light switch action. It gives you enough grip here at the tip, and that is exactly what you would want to see. You don't want, like I just had it recently with the Zero Tolerance 562, where you have a huge flipper tab, a real pocket poker. Personally, I don't like that too much. I really much prefer the smaller flipper tab configuration. And the ramp they do leading up to the flipper tab is also always something I like to look at, because in this particular case they managed to design it in such a way that it provides you with a meaningful forward position for your index and your thumb, with the jimping just in the right spot, so that you can squeeze the knife quite nicely and have a good grip on the knife when you do your cutting task, while not getting too much in the way of the actual cutting path of the knife. So all of that just flows together quite beautifully in this particular knife. And it is a bit plain Jane, but I have to say, for a lot of people who perhaps haven't developed a very discerning knife taste yet, they're just getting started out, they want a pocket knife, perhaps they don't exactly know what they're going to be using it for, they don't necessarily know what's good and what's bad. It's a great starter knife. It's providing people with an entry point to get into the hobby perhaps, or to take yeah, to get an inexpensive knife that just does the trick and is quite universal. And if you're a little bit more, well, into the bling side of things, then with the same design, it's quite easy to get something that looks a little bit more refined and a little bit more fancy. And if you're a little bit concerned with status appearances, then something in Damascus or perhaps with titanium scales can be had, and you pay a bit more, but you get all the great features that you get with your Civivi, and the Civivi Elementum in this particular case. Pocket clip is great. Once again, a deep carry pocket. The only thing I wish they would do is actually create a pocket in the scales for the lower bit of your pocket clip, so that it doesn't create that sharp corner where it transitions from the scale to the pocket clip mounting. They do have countersunk screws in there, so you don't get caught up on those, which is great. But ultimately there's no issue taking it in and out of the pocket. It slides in quite nicely. It's not a big step there, so it works. It would be a nice detail to incorporate that. Surely it can't be too much of an ask to put an additional pocket in there. It can't add dramatically to the cost of creating this knife. So I think for future iterations, perhaps that would be a worthy upgrade, because I don't think this knife or this knife design will go away anytime soon. It's just an all-time classic. You can, as I mentioned earlier, you can get this knife also in a button lock these days. And this is perhaps something I wanted to talk about for a little while. You see a lot of bar locks or axis kind of locks. You see a lot of button locks coming out these days, and all kinds of knife companies now see an opportunity to sell the same knife over again, just with a different locking and opening mechanism. And I find it, you know, on one hand I find it great, because I always liked the concept of a button lock, and the axis lock also. They're great in terms of much more ergonomic in terms of closing the knife, or having access up here, or just putting a button, pushing a button to close your knife is great. And the issue I'm having is that you're in most cases sacrificing in two areas, and one of them is the snappiness of your action. I have yet to come across a button lock or an axis bar lock type of lock that gives you the same snappiness and release that you get from a liner lock or from a frame lock. And the reason is that they incorporate some rams in the axis lock or in the button lock to simulate what you would get from a detent ball. But the reality is none of these break away from its locking position cleanly enough to produce the same kind of snappy action you see in a liner. Let's rephrase that, in a well done liner lock or frame lock. And I spend so much time looking at actions, and I spend so much time finding knives that I really like, where I can see and feel the heart and soul of the maker, if you like, where you can actually see, okay, that was intended, like the Chavez Redención. You open that particular knife and you just say, wow, everything is styled and everything is exactly like it should be. That's actually fun to open. And the same is true up to a degree for a lighter and cheaper knife with a liner lock that relies on a detent ball. It just bangs out. It's just the amount of energy that this detent ball connection to your plate can store is just so much greater than what you get out of an axis or out of a button lock, and therefore you get that crisp action. The second area where you're sacrificing is when you're actually closing the knife. And one thing I really like and enjoy is the fact that the plate really snaps distinctly into its closed position. So there's no way I'm going to shake this knife loose out of their scales. The plate is not coming out. I can shake that real hard. This is locked safely. And I had it just recently. I sold the knife, but I got a Kunwu Pulsar in Elmax, which is an awesome knife. Great plate design, beautifully done overall, and it has a bar lock type of lock. It comes with various types of springs to adjust the hardness, if you like, of the mechanism. And I just straight away decided to sell it. For me, that Kunwu Pulsar is a great EDC knife, but I just couldn't get over the fact that such a nice knife and then such a sloppy action. And it is one of the better ones, right? So by all means, come up with different opening and closing mechanisms, but why not make a button lock? Why not make an axis lock and still incorporate a detent ball? With the Kunwu Pulsar, I got the action tuned to a point where the opening was really okay. It wasn't spectacular, but it was alright. But then the entire retention of the plate inside the scales was so loose that you could just flick your wrist and the plate would come out. Now I'm actually living in a country in New Zealand where you know, if the guys at customs were to try and open this knife, they do the test whether it shakes out of its closed position just by flicking your wrist. Now I just got plain lucky that this knife got through customs, because if they would have tried it, they would have confiscated it. And also there is a safety aspect to it. So I appreciate, especially because Civivi, and I'm bringing that up because Civivi is now doing button locks, and many other companies jump on the button lock train, and I appreciate that. But one of the makers, would you please kindly step up and produce a button lock or a lock bar lock that actually still has a detent ball, and that helps with retaining the plate and battery, remove the bounce back you get from closing the action, and also give us the nice and snappy action back that we actually used from your brilliant frame and liner locks, right? So it can't be that hard, and I'm sure there's people out there who would appreciate if they got the convenience of a button lock paired with the snappiness and the safety retention feature of a detent ball. So just throwing that one out there, perhaps a little bit out of context, but looking at the Civivi and the many options you get for this particular knife these days, it's perhaps something for a manufacturer like Civivi to take on and lead the pack, and obviously the manufacturing capabilities are there, and it can't be too hard to put something like that into production. So yeah, that's my take on the Civivi Elementum. In this particular case, in the micarta version, a real plain Jane, and perhaps some of you can appreciate also the simplicity of something like that, as I do. And this knife really doesn't need my recommendation. It has sold many million times, I would imagine, but nonetheless, my endorsement here as well. This is a great design for a great multi-purpose everyday carry knife, and if you don't spend a lot of money, if you don't want to spend a lot of money, this is really a safe bet, and it comes thoroughly recommended. Alright, see you next time. Have a good day.